Good afternoon, Zoe. Thank you so much for making yourself available, panel. And thank you for submitting your report on time. It is a great deal of help. You have no idea. So of course we've got some questions for you. So I'm going to pass over to Sophie, and then we'll back and have some discussions.
Hi, Zoe. So I had two questions for yourself today. So my first question was on your work with community students. And in your report, you spoke about the different focus groups you were running. And I just wanted to hear more about what the results you got out of them, and if they hadn't run yet, what you hope to get out of them.
Yeah, so these were initially going to be a set of focus groups that we kind of run on Teams, but at some point last month we sort of realised an easier way for students might be to use the retention project, which would be a 10-minute phone call with those students as part of something that we already do sort of wider within GSU. So we're looking to do those calls in term 3, which is sort of in the next few weeks. So I'm hoping that from that we will get some nice insight into what community students are thinking at the moment in terms of what we're delivering for them and how we could maybe do that better to suit their needs as people who have to commute to get involved with our activities and other things. I think we've got about 9 participants, so we're hoping to get some useful insight, and that I will pass that on for the next officer team to kind of use, and yeah, hopefully it's useful for them.
Perfect, that's great to hear. Looking forward to seeing some important information coming out of that. And then my second question was about, as yourself, you ran the Disability History Month campaign, and I just wanted to find out how that campaign went.
So obviously there was sort of the beginning of the year where I ran Disability History Month, but then I wanted this campaign to be broader, so to touch on it in a few other places. So I think the most recent place that I sort of wanted to touch on it was within NEWA's campaign around eating disorders. So I sort of talked about how different mental health conditions or sort of neurodivergence can intersect with eating disorders or disordered eating. So I think in terms of how it went, I feel like it was definitely interesting to try and find ways to put that information out. So previously I kind of used like events and things, but with this I tried sort of creating a sort of social media content that people might be more used to looking on Instagram, where you would see like infographics and sort of written information. So I tried that with that. And yeah, I think in terms of the next sort of things that I was sort of involved in, I was recently at the NUS conference or National Union of Students, and we were there, we were sort of talking about policy around making university accessible to all, so that includes disabled students. So that is a national policy that I've sort of been involved in shaping, that hopefully our sort of future students continue to kind of hold NUS to account on delivering. Yeah, I don't know if that's what you're looking for.
No, it's great to hear that it went so well. Just as a follow-up question to that, on reflection, is there anything that you would have done differently regarding the events and the further events that you did after the month?
I think what I discovered through all the campaigns where I've done events has been that events are less popular with students than they would have been before COVID. I think online events definitely do better, but generally event attendance has been a lot lower, which doesn't negate the value of them for those people that do attend. But it does kind of beg the question of what format do students want to see things in now, because going to an hour-long event is not working for a lot of people. So I think as a students' union, we need to kind of really think about other ways we can engage students. And yeah, I think that kind of ties back to the commuter stuff as well. Like, what is it that about the way that we previously did things that isn't really sticking with the new kind of life after all the lockdowns that we had? Yeah, so I think that's a key thing I've learned is around engagement.
Perfect. Thank you for answering my questions.
Alrighty. Okay, we're moving faster than I thought that, but yes, great. So my first question, and I suppose is really my main question, is so yesterday you had your meeting with the VC and students of color, which I did hope to attend, but conflicting schedules, but it's okay. What was the outcome of that? What was the turnout? And do you feel as though, you had the kind of response that you wanted?
Yeah, so yesterday, I unfortunately wasn't able to join that event as I was sitting in some interviews that overran, but I sort of had some feedback, and it sounded like it went really well. Our Liberation chairs, this is their first, I think, yeah, this is their sort of first year properly running their liberation networks, and to see one of our chairs take an action from the network, which was to have a forum with the Vice Chancellor, that shows that the networks are kind of going in a good direction. The main thing that they kind of secured from that meeting was also to get the university to commit to doing a forum with our liberation networks every year, which I think is a big win. And yeah, I think in terms of what we were trying to achieve, having a space for students to talk to senior leaders and securing that commitment for this to continue over the years, I think it was a success, and I'm sort of really proud of the work that our student leaders have done to make that sort of happen.
Okay. It's positive. And okay, correct me if I'm wrong. Was it all the Liberation Network chairs that were present at that meeting as well?
So for oh, yeah. So for this one, it was specifically the Students of Colour Network, but as it was kind of an action that came from their network specifically, but it's something that we were hoping we could use this as a pilot to show the university, hey, like, talk to our liberation networks and have these open conversations. So hopefully in the future it becomes a wider thing than just the Students of Colour Network.
Okay, that's positive. Wonderful. Because I'm thinking about, for instance, last panel and when we spoke, and something that we were really passionate about, driving forward these last few months is the activism hub, and the work that you want to do with that. So, okay. First of all, how is that progressing? Are you satisfied with the speed that it's progressing at? And have you had any, maybe hostility is the wrong word, but any pushback from the university in some of the work that it is that you want to carry out?
I think in terms of sort of student activism in general, I think things are getting better. I think we just need to kind of, like, particularly as an officer team, hand over to the next team and make sure that a student-led union and student activism stays as a priority, because it's not quite securely there that it could kind of sustain itself. So we want to kind of keep pushing so that we have a really strong union where our students are kind of just taking action and know where to turn as well. I think in terms of, I guess, challenges with it, I think it can be difficult sometimes with the things that you want to address. So even today, there was a conversation I was having with someone who had been championing the BAME award in gap work, and she was talking about how scared staff are of the word decolonizing because they see it as a really aggressive or very charged word, and it's understandable where people may be upset by student activism because it's pushing boundaries. But I think the biggest challenge still is that people get so caught up in that they're like, oh my gosh, the students want to have a protest, the students want to decolonize, they want to divest from things. And it's like, but if you just think about what the actions are rather than the words and the tone of how we're pushing for things, then it's usually not as bad as people fear. So I think that is still something that I know definitely other officers as well have felt. I don't know if that is that though. Is there another part of your question?
I mean, I'm leading into it, but that does actually answer the part that I asked. So for instance, I guess it's more like a point of reflection. In the work that you've undertaken this year, because I know sometimes there are indications in that you have brought something to the university, but it just hasn't been taken on or it's been met with resistance. Do you feel as though that has, how shall I say, inhibited your work and your workflow?
I think there's definitely work I know is going to take a lot longer to get done just because people are hesitant. So the prime example being issues around dead naming and misgendering of trans students on our like systems and by staff. The university works slowly on things like that, and it's quite frustrating. But it does mean that that pushback does prevent work being done, and unfortunately, the cycle of officers does mean that if students and officers stop pushing for even for a year, then the university can drop it. So there are things that I'm definitely a bit worried about that might, I guess, get binned or like pushed back again because this office team are leaving and the next team might not pick it up. But yeah, I think I don't know. I think the university generally have been sort of they'll try to be allies, but I think there are things that they kind of I think it's more of a being slow or being hesitant than like actively blocking, if that makes sense as a distinction. Yeah.
Okay, cool. And I suppose the question that I will ask that I plan to ask, but I didn't ask the others, but I'll ask you and then continue onwards. So this issue raised by FES international students with resits, what's kind of been, I suppose, the progress on it? Because I think it's all four of you that have been working on the situation because it's quite pressing. And I mean, it's quite interesting to see, of course, students banded together to make it known that this was an issue. So how has it been taking that issue and moving towards getting a result? And do you think you're going to get the outcome that you want?
I think this has been a really interesting thing to be sort of involved in. I think initially this group of students were ready to go on strike because they weren't getting answers. Then through a series of meetings with GSU and the university have slowly kind of said, okay, maybe we'll allow this thing that we said was impossible. So now we've got to a point where 80% of those students will be getting an extension to their visa, which will allow them to then finish their degree in the UK and then be able to get their post-study visa, which the post-study visa is the thing that they're unable to get if we don't resolve this. But there are still 20% of those students who, because of attendance. The way the university is doing it is that if your attendance is below 25%, it will be difficult for them to make a case to UKVI to give those extensions, because it's essentially saying the university have to prove that you're going to continue to engage with your resit, and having low attendance is difficult to argue for, if that makes sense. So there are a group, I think it's I don't know if it's about 100. I feel like it's not 100. I feel like it's under 100, but it's still a large group of students who won't be able to get an extension from the university. What I've seen over the last few days is that there are students who are getting told that they won't get an extension. However, the university told them to study online, which means it's the university's fault that they weren't attending in person. And there are also students who have been attending, but because online attendance monitoring was a mess, those students are marked as absent. So there is definitely going to be a few students who have just been told by the university they won't get a CAS extension and won't be able to stay in the UK, who actually have the right to appeal that because they were attending. So that's the current state, is that we've got those 20% who are going to need tailored support from us, because they're going to have to argue their case for why they weren't attending, or that they were attending but the university didn't monitor that. So that's the current state.
Okay. Okay, that makes a lot of sense, because I know that there's been a few instances this academic year with, I don't want to say the university kind of bungling things up between timetables and attendance. And I think there was the whole thing of students getting that mass email of non-attendance when there was no grounds for non-attendance. So that's quite interesting, especially for international students and the issues that would present for them, because the dependence on that for them to stay in the country as well. So I think I would definitely love to see an update on the outcome of this, because this is major gap in the market, but I don't think it's really the fault of the SU in this case. But okay, cool, wonderful. I suppose my other question, because those are really the main questions that I wanted to ask. Um, okay, so okay, I suppose this falls under you as well. Um, Faith spaces at Avery Hill. Because I know Avery Hill is really kind of your shining jewel. What's been your perspective of getting that, hitting the ground running with that work?
Yeah, I think this is another example of those things that the university leaves for a long time, and kind of puts on the back burner. So I think faith spaces has always been an issue, and I think only like 2 years ago we managed to get more or better faith spaces, including in Dreadnought. And I think there's definitely an issue where there's, like, to me the process seems quite, like, I don't know if it's hypothetical, but like we'll be asking or reporting issues, and people who are experts in estates and facilities, who could kind of find solutions, go back and say, okay, let's have like a consultative exercise. So right now, the same with Stockwell Street Library as well. We're in this conversation, and I've not got the latest on this conversation because I wasn't, I've been away, but this conversation is going towards, let's look around and find a suitable space. So we're kind of accepting that that's the process they want to go through. Obviously, you know, these people run these buildings, they should know already that whether there's a space, but we're going to, I think, myself, Attica and Jabed at least are sort of involved in this and are going to have a look around and find some suitable spaces. But this does kind of mean it's a longer process than it needs to be, because they're wanting to do that exercise of consulting, if that makes sense. But yeah, the spaces, we are quite aware that those spaces are not suitable, and it's frustrating that this is affecting everybody, particularly in a really important time for students of faith. Yeah, I don't know if that gives some clarity. I haven't had the latest yet, but
Yes. Yes. I believe there's okay, no, never mind. Yes, you will have more clarity, and I trust you will have more clarity next panel. Okay, cool. So I suppose the final question is more of a point of reflection, because next panel will be our last panel, and June is far coming. So do you think with the current pacing of the work you're undertaking at the moment that by the time you round up, you feel as though you've completed the things that you set out to accomplish this year?
I think for me, I'm definitely conscious of how much time I have left, and what best to use it for. I think at the moment, my biggest concern is that there's a lot of interviews that will be coming up for officers, and I think interviews are an important part of our work, because we're appointing people who have a longer impact than, doing an event or something. But I think for this team, a lot of the year has been spent doing interviews, and I worry that those kinds of things have become part of, or a very big part of this team's role, and that at the end of the year, because there'll be more, that might then distract from us finishing our work. Like, this is a personal and a team concern. Like, I'm concerned for the team and myself. So that's my biggest worry. I think my biggest piece of work at the moment will be finishing that activism hub and getting all those resources together. So that's a kind of a project that I feel I'll be able to get done. And then the other things I'm kind of working with staff on. So in terms of the commuter stuff and in terms of doing a sports forum, those are things that I'm working with colleagues on. So there's a bit of what's the word, like there's a bit of comfort knowing that I'm doing this with somebody. So we will get it done. Yeah, I'm hoping that I get things done. Yeah.
Okay, well, I mean, we'll be here to make sure if you don't. But okay, great. Okay, that builds up a wider picture. Because I think the work that you've chosen to undertake in particular is a bit more difficult to categorize, and a bit more difficult to have like very, very discrete markers in progress. So that is helpful. Yes, I think that's pretty much all that we wanted to, well, discuss with you about for today, unless anybody else has had a question appear in their heart, which I don't think is the case. But thank you so much. So we will be sending some actions, and I think the next panel will be mostly reflective, because by then we're kind of assuming that the most of the legwork would have already actually been done. So looking forward to seeing you wrap all of this up in a very neat bow. Yes, thank you.